Hello, everyone. Greetings for the weekend, and I hope you all are doing well. I have invited today here with me. I have Mr. Jason Sylvester. How are you, Jason?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. So, Mr. Jason, as I have got a introduction with him back in 2018, so I know him as a person who got experience, vast experience in emerging economies, and let's rest is we get to know about him. So, Jason, up to you. What about you? Who are you? What you do? What's your experience? And just let us know, and then we start the podcast.
Sure. Okay. So I'm Canadian, but I've spent almost 20 years, well, actually more than 20 years now outside of Canada. Almost 20 years of that now in Asia. So I only worked in Canada for about 3 years after I graduated. I've been in Asia now coming up on 20 years. I've worked in a number of different economies around Asia Pacific, Hong Kong, Philippines, Thailand, mainland China, in Pakistan a couple of years ago. So I tend to move around fairly often, depending on the nature of the work and where I'm needed. And
Okay.
so in the last 5 years, I've been working as a freelance management consultant. So I get called in on projects around the region, often where a company might be having some issues and they need some help to sort things out.
Okay, awesome. So I look forward that we'll be learning a lot from you based on your experience. So we'll first, here's the topic we have decided that Jason will be talking about. Jason, the topic will be stagnant companies and poor leadership. So we'll start with what are the common factors that you think stagnant companies actually face?
Okay, so when was it? About 3 years ago, I was just pondering some of the contracts I had worked on, and I had realized that there were three common factors in every company that I had gone into over the previous several years, and not even just as a consultant, but even just companies I've worked at throughout my career. And I realized that these three factors are common issues to all of them that are having trouble. And the first one is a lack of systems. So whether that be you know, a poorly configured system. I was at one company that had a very expensive and robust piece of software, but it was customized for head office use in one country. And so the offices in other countries were forced to um, manually key in all their changes. So that was, it's time consuming, and it also leads to human error. So the more that they have to manually do things, the higher the percentage or the chance that they're going to make a mistake, which is something that, it's human nature. Mistakes are going to be made. Or in a number of cases, the systems are lacking entirely. The management or the owner of the company simply just doesn't want to invest the money into a software system such as Microsoft Dynamics, and so the staff end up basically just using Microsoft Office. So they're using Excel to basically do their jobs. So it tends to be very inefficient. There's a lot of duplication of effort. So say like an order comes into customer service, and the customer service rep types it into an Excel sheet, and then production needs to rekey in all the production order into their sheets, and invoicing needs to rekey it in again themselves into their sheet. So there's a lot of duplication of effort. It's not only is it inefficient, it's prone to error, and it's disempowering for the employees because they're forced to work harder, and they get a sense that the management doesn't care, and so they tend to be disengaged from their job. Um, and so the graphic that I sent you that you can put up during the final edit comes from Gallup. Now, Gallup does quite a lot of research on employee engagement, And every 2 years, they issue their State of the Global Workplace report, which has some pretty sobering numbers, that something like 13 to 15% of employees globally are actively engaged at their job. And fully 2/3 of employees basically just show up every day and are, passing time. They're not actively engaged in their job. And about 15 to 20% of employees are actively disengaged. Some of them are even harming the company's interests. And so one of the interesting things from Gallup is what they call their Q12, and these are the four different phases. Not phase would probably be the wrong word. The four different categories that are needed for a company to have to growth. And so there's basic needs, individual needs, team needs, and then once you've met the first three, you have what the growth needs. And within the basic needs, the second one they have is that the employees have the basic materials and equipment to do their job. And so that comes back around to this key issue that I come into these companies and time and again, that point number two isn't even being met. The employees do not have even the basic tools to do their job effectively. And so, of course, the company is, they tend to be having trouble. I've heard from as a supplier to one company I dealt with. I was doing some work with them, and the supplier was complaining to me that there was no systems in place. It's basically all nothing's digitized. It's all paper, and it was frustrating from their point of view. And two of my friends are, one of them is a capital advisor. So companies that are looking for angel investors, and so he has the connections to the investors and the companies that are looking for investors. And another one of my friends works for a billionaire, and his job is to value companies and make the acquisitions. And both of them made some interesting points to me that companies that are missing these a basic GL system like Microsoft Dynamics, if another company is looking to acquire them, they're going to lose about 25% of the value of their company to a company that wants to take them over, because there's this lack of a proper system in place where all your employee paperwork is just in these independent Excel sheets. And so it's very disorganized. And so any acquiring company is going to reduce the value of their offer to the company by about 25%. So in a lot of cases, these small business owners, maybe they think they're being shrewd, and they're cutting corners by not investing in something like Microsoft Dynamics, but then they're kind of blind to the fact that there's a lot of hidden costs. There's a lot of intangibles, such as the amount of rework, the human error, maybe potentially losing customers because your customers are frustrated. Orders are late, or there's billing errors. And so in this case, there's, a lot of these intangibles that they're missing. They're focused solely on, it's going to cost me, X thousands or tens of thousands of dollars for Microsoft Dynamics or a similar bespoke software system for my staff. But they don't realize that, if you have a customer that's spending $20,000 a month, and you lose that customer because you won't spend $2,000 to invest, in a programmer to do something. Well, the ROI is pretty obvious. That the 2,000 is peanuts compared to
Exactly.
even if it just saves you from losing that one customer, that you're maintaining that 20,000 a month. And sometimes it just comes down to framing the argument in that way so that they understand it, that they're not just looking at it solely from the perspective of cost avoidance, that it's a cost of doing business, that you need to invest in your business. You're missing 25% of the value of your company should you sell it. You risk losing these valuable customer billables, the amount of lost productivity in your employees who are having to do a lot of work by hand. You tend to get not only lost productivity, you tend to get employee burnout and turnover, which is also a cost. And so it tends to be, maybe it's a hidden cost. But so the first one is obviously then this lack of a proper system that's in place. And that can be just something as simple as Microsoft Dynamics. It doesn't have to be a really expensive, bespoke, custom software application.
Exactly.
But depending on industry,
One thing I'll add here, Jason, that what I found that having proper systems actually empowers people more, rather than just going through, manual work. It actually burns people out, like they are simply doing robotic work time and again. There is no automation, and what they're doing is just repetitive work. So, a person has to comes in and he has to check, bank statement daily, and all he has to do is to again, apply all those formulas back again, open the Excel sheet and the repetitive work. Rather, if just it's just one-time cost, and if you like got a proper system and channelize it, then what happens is that you grow, and you allow people to think, diversity in a creative manner, so they come up with more, proper solutions. Rather, a person who is so much involved in repetitive work of, let's say Microsoft Excel, where is the productivity or creativity coming from? It's like the person is, spending 8 to 10 hours in office, and all he or she is doing is simply, maintaining Excel sheets. So it's like having system actually and truly empowers, the employees rather than having just, manual work.
Right. Yeah, I did a cost analysis on one piece of software, just with 3 employees. And I just simply asked them how much of your time in any given day, what percentage of your time do you need to make these manual changes that could be automated with a few software tweaks? And I calculated that it was something like 15,000, between 10 and 15,000 US dollars every year. So that they're spending all this money for their employees to sit there and just make these changes, which again is prone to human error and mistakes. But it's lost productivity, and for a few $1,000s of a software change, they could recover that money instead of wasting $10,000 to $15,000 year after year after year. And again, and one of the other intangibles with that is if they make a mistake and you lose a customer over it, that's one of your accounts receivables that's now gone. So, and if that's $20,000 a month, was it worth it to lose a $20,000 a month contract? To waste $15,000 a year that would have cost you a few $1,000s to update your software.
So the second factor you
it's communications. So people are either just shut down, like again, if they're disengaged, and they're not talking to their colleagues. In one case, I found that the departments they seemed to be actively working against each other. I think they all had like their own sort of silos of information, and they were rabidly protecting their turf, and so there was like a distinct lack of communication between departments that was causing a lot of dysfunction between critical business operations that needed to get done, that were being hindered by this flow of information, but not just between departments, but also filtering up through levels of management. If you have a boss or a CEO who just doesn't listen to anybody, and there's numerous articles on Inc. and Harvard Business Review that talk about poor leadership, and one of the key factors of poor leadership is this lack of a willingness of the leader to listen to their subordinates. That they either they think they know everything, or maybe it's an ego thing that they don't want to be seen to be taking advice from a subordinate. And that kind of ties into then the third aspect of the dysfunction is the poor leadership, where in some of these cases, these are successful businesses, like these are small business owners who are successful. They might be a millionaire or a multimillionaire a few times over, and so they've rightly earned some measure of pride in the work they've done. I was talking to a Corn Ferry consultant a few years ago. I was really frustrated with this one project. We just could not convince the owner of how to do things. And he made a really interesting point that he said some successful people succeed in spite of themselves, that they're good in one or two key areas. So maybe they're a brilliant technical engineer, or they're a superstar salesman. And so in that regards, they've made their business successful and they've made themselves wealthy. But when it comes to other factors of running a business, their ego kind of gets in the way. That they're not willing to listen. I'm a successful small business owner and I made it, and I know what I'm doing. I'm like, okay, great. And like this Corn Ferry consultant said, yeah, you're a really great engineer, but you don't really understand the operations of how to run the business. So you need a good general manager, or you need a good, maybe you need a good marketing person, or in today's market, you need a good social marketing person. Not because not everybody is adept at every skill, right? You need good finance people, you need good marketing people, you need good sales people, you need good operations people, and good leaders recognize that they can't do everything, and they will listen to their subordinates when they have these good ideas. And so where I've found that companies are stagnating, there's like this conjoining of all three of these factors, that there's no systems in place. The communications either between departments or between the boss is shut down, and the boss just doesn't listen. He just thinks he's a superstar, he's made his millions, and he just knows everything. I'm like, okay, well, then why isn't your business growing? I think the key word is small. You're a small business owner, and the key word is small, because you're thinking small. You're not willing to let go of some of the responsibility and let the people around you help move the company forward.
Okay. So if these, you mentioned three factors, and if the reality is that companies are stagnant, based on these three critical factors, so what do you think? What is possibly gonna help companies grow? That you mentioned one of the factors, that you're small since your think is small. That's one of the reasons. So what else do you think that is gonna help responsible for a growth of a stagnating?
Well, I think they need to be open-minded. Specifically if it's a small single owner company, they need to be open-minded. They need to realize that they can't do everything, that their business is stuck for a reason, and usually it's them, and they don't necessarily see that. And there's been a big change. I don't really know when it happened, but the sort of the latest in leadership thinking is about managers who are coaches, not bosses. And so again, coming back to this, engaging your employees comes back to this coaching, that employees who are engaged know that they have a boss who is invested in them as a person, both personally and professionally, will help them to grow and develop. One of the interesting things that Gallup talks about in their research is a lot of managers, it's kind of pointless to try to harp on an employee's weaknesses. Oh, you're really bad at this. Well, that just disempowers the employee. And, whatever you're bad at, if you're bad at it, you're not really going to get better with it. And so the new leadership thinking is you concentrate on their strengths. So if you have someone who's maybe not very good people person, you don't want them in a sales role. Maybe they're a really good technical person, so maybe you move them to the operations team, or they're good with numbers, so you move them to the finance team, or vice versa. maybe you have somebody on the operations team who's struggling, but they're a really good people person. So maybe they'd be better in customer service or in sales. So you really want to focus more to their strengths. And I came across some research within the last few months. It was a really interesting concept about how most companies will coach for compliance. That I want you to do this because it meets metric A, B, or C. So you're doing something wrong, and I want you to change your behavior so that you are complying with how I want you to do it, rather than coaching from a place of empowerment and compassion. That what matters to you, what do you want to do, where do you want to take your career, do you want to go back to school, can we support you with some time off or with some tuition that you can do could just be a course, could be a part-time degree. Maybe you want to maybe you've kind of come up through the ranks, but you've never actually been to university, or you didn't finish, and you'd like to go to night school and get your degree. So can the company help you in that regard? So that kind of coaching, they call it coaching from compassion rather than compliance. So that is much more empowering to the employees, and it will engage them more so that they know that their manager, their coach, is invested in them and wanting to build them up. And so now that employee has some vested interest in helping the company and doing their job. So I think it was Kenneth, not Kenneth, the Virgin Airlines guy. What's his name? Steven. Sorry?
Southwest?
Yeah, no, the Virgin Airlines. I can't remember what his name is. I'm failing at his name.
Exactly, I'm forgetting.
Yeah, I'm sorry to your viewers. I'm just completely blanking right now.
No, exactly.
He had a really interesting quote that someone said, well, we're spending all this money, in training our people. And he says, what if they leave? And he says, well, what if we don't train them and they stay? So, again, like a lot of these companies, they tend to, from what I've observed, there tends to be a cost avoidance, that they see that there's cost to training, to investing in people, to investing in systems, and they're hung up on the sticker price of what it's going to cost, rather than looking at how it's going to generate growth for the business by making them more productive, by lowering employee absenteeism, by reducing human error. Even just like I said, keeping one client happy because you're not making their orders aren't late all the time, or they're not constantly having to come back to you with billing errors. So it's just a matter of, I think a lot of times it's about reframing the argument. A friend of mine that I do some consulting with, he's an INSEAD thought leader, and he wrote an article a few years ago that went viral and got picked up by business magazines all over the world. And it says, does your organization run on fear? So when a company is in distress, if it is stagnating, they do tend to be running on fear, that they don't want to take any investment that's going to more cash outlay. And so rather than doing what needs to be done to stem the blood, they're reacting from fear. And instead of being proactive, they're being reactive. And that's just not a good place to be in. I saw one company, it was before I got there, and I was told that most of the star employees had left. That their I think it was 5 to 10 people, I can't remember the exact number, had left. That they saw the writing on the wall, they saw the dysfunction at the executive levels, they saw that their clients were all leaving, and so their star performers just up and like en masse quit. So employee turnover is a huge red flag. So there was one company I dealt with even before I got there. I was on the phone with them, and they were just telling me, we have high turnover, and defects, and this and that, and without knowing anything about it, I knew exactly what the problem was, and it comes right back to that, issue number two on the Gallup basic needs, that they obviously have no systems in place, and your employees are disempowered and stressed out, and that's why they're all leaving within 6 to 8 months. And sure enough, by the time I got there, and I could see, there's nothing. It's kind of like flying by the seat of their pants, and they're lurching from one emergency to another, and that's, you need to stabilize, and you need to put the basics in place. So until you have a solid base, you're not going to have any growth. So, and you're just going to keep annoying your customers.
Exactly. I remember there was this one thing I was reading. Maybe it was from Starbucks owner Howard Schultz, I guess. Maybe if I'm not wrong. So he was just, I read the quote. He mentioned, train the people in a way that they can leave, but treat them in a way that they don't want to. So it's simply like that.
It was Richard Branson. That's the name I was thinking. Richard Branson.
Richard Branson. Yeah.
That might be the same quote from him as well. That it's, and that's the new leadership paradigm, is you need to invest in your people. And when only 13% of your employees, and that's the global average, in some countries it drops to 5%. So if you've got a company of 100 people, you've only got five of your employees are doing all of the work. You really need to be doing all you can to empower them. There was an interesting article I read about a year ago, talking about there was a shift away. There was, a couple of years ago, there was this big business paradigm all about collaboration, right? It was all about, companies, we need to collaborate. And what that ended up doing was kind of fostering a culture of mediocrity, that, the star performers couldn't really perform because, we have to collaborate with, the 67% of the employees who are, just showing up every day. And so that just disempowers your stars, and they end up leaving. So that whole, that leadership paradigm of collaboration has kind of gone away now, or is dying in some places. And it's shifting more now to this manager as coach rather than as boss. And now with COVID, you have a completely new paradigm now where, businesses are struggling, people are working from home. So there's a whole new set of challenges that need to be met. One of the good things about working from home is if you live in a big city, like Karachi, like traffic can be an issue in Karachi. Or like Manila, Jakarta, these are cities with notorious traffic jams. So if your staff can work from home and not have to spend 2-3 hours in traffic every day, that's a huge benefit. Plus, if you cut down on your office space, that's a huge part of your operating budget is rent on offices and the overhead, insurance and air conditioning. So, there's a lot of benefits to be had and opportunities from this new working from home. So
that's one of the reasons that like majority of the companies I was reading, that they aim that from 2021 it's going to be work from home permanently. So just to cut down their costs, they're too much focused on working from home. That they plan to go all virtual. So no office space. You work from home. You deliver. You do meetings and all. So cutting down the cost, and it's simply working from home. So I was reading that there are some companies who are actually planning for this. Okay, you mentioned about leadership, and since it's a COVID and there are many challenges. So what do you think? What are the new trends that are going to happen in leadership styles or leadership that will help companies and eventually employees in the new normal?
Well, I think the leaders are really going to have to focus on some new strategies. Again, about this working from home, making arrangements. Again, it's coming back to this basic systems. Especially if people are working from home, you're going to need some robust and secure systems in place to enable a more efficient working Like, if everybody's working from home off their own Excel spreadsheet, that's going to be a recipe for disaster. The same consultant I mentioned, the INSEAD thought leader, he's putting together, or he was, I don't know if he's still working on it, sort of like I would say, like, not a checklist is probably the wrong word, but putting together a course for management on, okay, how can you empower your employees in this new paradigm of working from home, and what do you need to have in place, and how can you be effective, from a productivity point of view, from a leadership point of view, from working from home. Again, having like secure communications and systems, so is definitely one issue. So
Okay. So I
definitely
guess
interesting times.
exactly. So I believe the real test of nerves has actually started in 2020. Companies, even not just small companies, like people and managers and leaders in big companies, they were actually stuck. That what should be their strategy and how can we cater to such issues. One end, you are losing business. You might be in some industry that actually is suffering highly from the the COVID condition and the, like lockdowns and all situations. So on the other side, you have your employees who are looking up to you that what would be the decision of our company, and how are we gonna suffer? Are they gonna favor us, or what's gonna how are it's gonna end up? And that's where actually the real the leader who stands up for the employees and for the customers, that no matter what, I'm here, and we together, can take this thing, and like we can cope up with this thing, and this time shall too pass if we are together as a team. So I believe that's actually helps a lot if bosses, just get out of their like being designation of being a boss, and they stay low key, being a bit humane, and care for their employees. And on the other side, if they focus too much on their customers and just like focusing too much on numbers and numbers, actually lose your internal customers that are your employees. So if you're focusing too much on getting sales, and if reaching out to a number is your ultimate goal, so maybe in this entire process, the leader lose, not the leader actually, the boss actually, or the manager loses actually the real people who should be invested upon in time. But that's the dilemma which I believe should be created by the stagnating companies. And that's a very good, comprehensive, detailed discussion. If you want to summarize it, that will be very great. If you have some last words to conclude this.
Okay. Yeah, so just to summarize again, so the three aspects that I noticed, coming together in stagnating companies, which the term I coined for it was dysfunction junction, that you have the junction of lack of systems, lack of communication, and poor leadership, come together to create this wholly dysfunctional system, where companies are just stagnating. That you're losing customers, you're losing your staff, turnover is high, and so that needs to be addressed. Again, coming back to the Gallup Q12 points, you got to meet the basic needs. That the tools have to be in place for the employees to do their job. Without that in place, you're just going to continue to struggle. Again, the new leadership paradigm, from boss to coach, and to get your employees engaged, and really to understand your employees, and what they want for themselves personally, professionally, where they want to take their career, and how they can be supported, helps to raise their engagement level. And again, not just coaching for compliance, to get them to fall in line, but to coach from a perspective of where do they really want to go. So maybe this person, right now is like a customer service rep, but their dream is to become a lawyer. So, can you help them with tuition, or, some time off to go to school so that they can become a lawyer? That's infinitely more empowering to them to do their job and to be engaged at work. So to look at the three issues, to be a coach and to coach with compassion, not compliance.
Awesome, awesome. I believe that's pretty much comprehensive, and you summarized it so well. For me, it's a very good learning perspective that you have mentioned, and thank you so much for your time, Jason. I appreciate a lot that you are there and you guided us so well. And I believe in future, we can have another session on some very good topic based on your vast experience. And thanks a lot for your time. And okay, listeners and viewers, I hope you might have and you must have learned a lot with the perspective that Jason has mentioned. And till the next podcast and till the another interesting topic, I say you goodbye. Bye bye.
Thank you for having me.